Clicky clock goes tick tock, freezing time as it rides down your block. Cause it's timeless. Cause it's timeless.
What up, guys? This is another episode of Timeless Podcast. With this episode, we got some interesting topics to talk about. In the building, we got Dennis, myself, Nair, Denny, and Meldon.
All right, Dennis, go ahead and tell us about yourself, man.
So first and foremost, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm an educator. I've been a medical student. I'm a scientist, a little bit of a social activist as well. And that's pretty much it.
How long you been in school, bro?
7 years.
7 shit, man. I
7
barely got
years.
through 4.
Barely.
What did you even do for 7 years in school?
So my bachelor's degree was in biochemistry and neuroscience, and I did a lot of undergraduate research at Western. My research focused primarily on cancer treatments, and then the last 3 years I've been a graduate student. So my first master's that I got was in biology, and the concentration was once again biochemistry, and I continued my research that I had as an undergraduate in cancer treatments, and then now I'm finishing up my certification to become a nationally certified teacher, so I can teach.
You got a teacher job, or?
I will here pretty soon in the future. I have been teaching in the last couple of years at Western Kentucky University. I've taught anatomy and physiology to majors biology. I've taught introduction to cells, molecular genetics, metabolism, and that type of stuff too, to the students that are majors.
What made you want to get into teaching and all this scientific stuff?
So not a lot of people know this about me. When I was in high school, I was actually recruited to tutor for the Kentucky Department of Education. There was a parent that was a foster parent, and he had a group of foster kids. And my guidance counselor called me into her office one day because she knew that I was pretty good at the background knowledge and what he needed help in. And he was a ward of the state. He had been truant from school for about 2 years. He wasn't hygienic, and so the state took him away from his mother and gave him to a foster parent. And so he came in, and this was my junior and senior year, and my goal was, as his tutor, to take his grades from where they were, take his reading level from where it was, and increase it to state benchmarks. And that's what we did, and that was my first experience with teaching. And of course, in the past, I'd also helped out, if ever some colleagues or some friends or whatever needed help with their assignments and explaining it to them in a way that made sense. And so that was my first exposition to teaching. But then medicine I've always been fascinated by, just the human body, just science in general. The perspective that it provides. My mind is very analytical, and so I've always loved that. And so I've always wanted to also be a physician. So kind of the best of both worlds, and that approaches me. My long-term goal is to teach at medical school, but for the foreseeable future, I'll be trying to teach either at high school or college somewhere.
Nice. So you did a lot of research with cancer, stuff like that, correct?
Yeah. 6 years of my research time was spent on cancer research. Long time.
And I know Dennis from little kids, and I swear he's gonna find the cure to cancer.
I don't know about
If
that.
anybody does, man, be my guy.
I don't know about that. I mean, I hope I contributed in some small fashion, in some small way. That's the way academia works. All small little contributions just piling up, years, decades, and then a big breakthrough comes in. So my research focused on finding novel treatments in different cancer cell lines. And so one of the things that I worked with was a chemotherapy drug called cisplatin, and it's been around since the 70s, and partnering the treatment of cisplatin with another compound that is found in nature. And it's a compound called curcumin, which is found in turmeric, which is a spice that a lot of people use when they're cooking and stuff like that. So using derivatives of that chemical and using it in conjugation with cisplatin and seeing how can that affect the different cancer cell lines that plague people today.
So is that something like chemo? Like, not the same concept, but is that a part of this cure?
So the term chemotherapy is a very broad term. It was coined by a German scientist, I think, back in the mid 1800s. And so at its core, chemotherapy, it just means therapy with chemicals. But what exactly is a chemical? Is it bleach? Is it detergent? Well, technically a chemical is almost anything. There are natural chemicals that we use on a daily basis. And so not until recently has the term really become used in everyday media and colloquial English as a chemical attack, like a strong chemical attack, like nuking the body chemical attack type thing. And so essentially, to answer your question, yes, cisplatin is a type of chemotherapy. It is effectively a cure for testicular cancer. If caught in early stages, cisplatin will, for the most part, in stages 1 and 2, has a 96% penetration rate, and almost considered a cure by the CDC for treating testicular cancer, and it's effective against many other different forms of cancer too. So lung cancer and ovarian cancer, all different kinds of ones. But the curcumin side of it is the natural aspect of it that we're always looking to find in new drugs to treat these different cancers, because with chemotherapy comes a lot of nasty side effects.
Yeah.
And so the idea was, can you take the efficacy of this drug and partner it with other drugs to reduce the side effects while still killing the cancer? And that was the idea behind the research. And we had some pretty interesting findings that are still being worked on. And then I've got 2 publications, God willing, coming out here in the near future on that, published in academic journals.
So going on that, I mean, it's the question everybody wants to hear. Do you ever think there's going to be a cure for cancer? Like one cure that cures it all?
I think eventually, yes. The problem is, cancer is something that people don't fully understand. It is the name given to a family of diseases. It is not one disease. It's not like I'm going and I'm treating your bacterial infection with an antibiotic, right? Cancer, there are hundreds of different types of cancer, and they all have different profiles. They all act and behave in different ways. Some of them go through your blood. Some of them are metastatic. Some of them form tumors. And within each individual type of cancer, you have different microenvironments around the cells that become cancerous. And so it gets very complex very quickly. So we're not at that point right now.
Yeah.
But in the future, once the research builds and, with some time, decades maybe, you never know. Maybe we can make a breakthrough like that.
What's the one thing that ties all cancer together? Let's basically explain what cancer is.
So at its core, cancer is a name, like I said, given to a group of diseases caused by uncontrolled cell division. And so as we grow and as we age, our cells become old and they die and they need to get replaced. As we age, the body accumulates certain mutations, and past a certain point, those mutations can cause the cell cycle, which is the process by which the cells grow and divide, can cause that process to go unchecked. So picture it like being on a toll road. Every single few miles, you have some toll booths and you got to pay the toll to continue. Well, cancer is kind of like being on a toll road with no toll booths. So it just goes through traffic, it's free flowing, there's no control, there's no checkpoint. That's kind of what happens with cancer. And then those cells then divide, and they divide very rapidly, very quickly. And then if it's a metastatic cancer, which forms a tumor, then in that type of cancer, you can have some tumors form. Or if it's a blood cancer, if it's an occult blood cancer like leukemia, then it'll just go through the body like that, like a leukemia does. So that's essentially what it is. It's just uncontrolled cell division that is caused by cell cycle checkpoints being turned off, and then the cells just divide uncontrolled and unchecked.
So I know, like, people talk about chemo. That's like the main thing you hear when you think of a cancer patient. What is chemo?
Chemotherapy is essentially a targeted chemical attack using one or more drugs. And like I said, cisplatin was one of those drugs that we work with on a daily basis in the oncology fields. So what you essentially do is, depending on the stage of the cancer, the type of cancer, the patient's age, their demographics, all that stuff, you design a treatment program with chemotherapy to attack those cells and kill them before they get to a certain stage that would lead to patient dying. And of course, you have different stages of cancer. And so the confusion with chemotherapy then becomes, sometimes it doesn't work as effectively as you would hope so because of the degree to which that cancer is advanced. And so if you have someone who's a 4th stage pancreatic cancer or a 4th stage breast cancer, you can do a mastectomy. You can have the breasts removed, but that's the primary form of treatment. Then the physician, the oncologist, would come in and do a chemotherapy regimen to make sure that any other remaining cancer cells in the body are then treated, because you can remove the tumor, but there can still be cancer that comes back. Yeah. And so that's the way a lot of chemotherapy works today. If the cancers form tumors, then you cut the tumor out, and then you use chemotherapy or radiation, really, to treat it and to try to kill those cells.
The facts say, I've read a little bit about the chemo treatment. The facts say, I think it's over 90% of chemotherapy doesn't work. So why do you think doctors still implement it? Is it because they make a cut out of it, or what?
I don't think that is the reason. So it depends on what information you're looking at. So the problem with academic research is when a lot of analyses or meta-analyses are done on these topics, a complex conclusion will be formed over the course of 20 pages of academic literature. that'll then be summarized, and that'll continue being summarized and paraphrased to one sentence that the public can digest.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you get a phrase like that. So chemotherapy is effective. Like I said, like cisplatin, if you catch it early in testicular cancer, it'll effectively cure your testicular cancer.
Yeah.
You know, but it's sometimes the drugs become ineffective because cancer can become resistant to cisplatin or different forms of chemotherapy. Sometimes the drugs don't get into the cell and target the DNA to cause the damage, to kill the cancer. So it depends on, you know, how you really look at the analytics and how you look at the stats, really, that to get those numbers. One big thing that I know is we always look at, in the oncology world, at cancer survival rates. And so when you treat someone, how long will their life be after you treat them versus untreated? And so we have mountains of data on that already. And usually, I think if I remember correctly, there was a meta-analysis done out of a lab group in the United Kingdom, and we have across all cancers with chemotherapy treatment and across all stages. And so with respect to all stages, which means stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, that is a lot of different, you know, cancer stuff. Yeah. About a 48% efficacy of chemotherapy alone, not paired with surgery, not paired with radiation. And so it just depends on how those numbers are discussed and how they're analyzed, really. So that it is a very effective treatment. Not to say that it is the best treatment, but it's one of the best treatments that we currently have, depending on the stage, the age, the profile, the advanced degree, and the type of cancer that you have. So that's the way I would address that. And, you know, there are things coming out in the future too. So like we have immunotherapy now, which harnesses the body's immune system to target cancer. You know, and we'll have other treatments, you know, more targeted medicine, targeted chemical attacks and whatnot too. So
it's kind of like the reverse of chemo, right? Where chemo kind of wipes everything out. You're using your immune system to your advantage.
Yeah, your immune system does take a big hit during chemotherapy treatment for sure. So the idea behind immunotherapy is harnessing the chemical power inside the body, the immune power of the body to attack the cancer cells. So that is one option. You know, you could also pair that with other chemotherapies. You can pair it with radiation, you pair it with surgery. So oncologists are still devising treatment plans, treatment schedules that incorporate some, if not all, of those treatment strategies.
So do you think, like, I think when what I've heard, what I've read about is when people get rid of cancer, they should after that stop eating carbs, stop eating all that because it's a fuel to cancer. What do you think about that?
One thing that is clear is sugars fuel cancer cells. That is for sure. The thing that I won't get too technical about it because I don't want to turn it into a lecture, but cancer cells do this thing that's called the Warburg effect. And essentially your body does, what our body is really good at is our primary fuel source is called ATP. So for those of you that remember your high school biology class, it's your usable form of energy, right? And so we use that as our usable form of energy. In order to get that ATP, you have to go through a process called aerobic respiration. And so aerobic implying that we use oxygen. Cancer cells do anaerobic respiration, which is much faster. And they grow much quicker. So in the absence of oxygen, they grow at such a exponential rate. They outperform the growth rate of your regular cells.
Yeah.
And so the way that they do that, of course, is by ingesting the energy that we give it. Well, the body's most readily usable form of energy comes from what we eat, which is usually glucose. Right?
So why can't you starve it? So like, you don't put fuel on the fire.
You have to eat. Because you got to eat. You got to have your other cells too survive. And so the thing about cancer that you got to realize is it will continue to grow because there are other metabolic processes by which it can harness energy, not just carbohydrates. And so you can eat a clean, quote unquote, clean diet and in hopes to never get cancer. But it's much, much more complex than that. So
but you think it helps?
The evidence is inconclusive, to be honest. So if you look at the established literature and if you look at the academic journals that discuss, which there are a few that discuss cancer growth and survival rates and diet. So there are a few that publish on that type of stuff. The evidence is still inconclusive on how exactly diet affects cancer growth rates. Like we know you have to ingest some degree of carbohydrates. Nobody goes zero carb for 5 years. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. So it's very hard to establish controls for those type of things in order to say that this is not anecdotal, that it's not just due to chance, that it's something that we can prove if we establish this set of conditions over and over again. that has not been fully determined yet. So it is possible, it is possible that the carbohydrates do have a very strong effect on cancer growth rates, and that, cutting them out completely, could starve the cancer, but it's also possible that it may not do anything, that it's, could be placebo, it could be other things as well. So just a lot more research has to be done.
So on top of cancer and kind of with what's going on right now in the media, there's a lot of stuff going on about JUULs and e-cigs and stuff like that, which were supposed to be alternatives to smoking cigarettes, and now they've kind of backfired, and they're causing cancer and other kind of illnesses themselves. What do you think about that?
Well, so the big thing that where we see the huge attention right now that's coming from the CDC is because when these e-cig companies, and JUUL is the face of the e-cig company right now, when they came out, the intention was to be for people that are trying to stop smoking, as it correctly should have been, because the addiction to smoking does not come from any of the other chemicals really other than nicotine. So nicotine is the real addiction that happens. The problem is, in order for them to increase sales, they marketed to kids. They took social media influencers. They made it look hot. They made it look sexy. They gave it like really cool flavors to pair it with hookah's popularity in the United States. The Red Bull, mango, mint, these other flavors, and that caused a spike of usage amongst kids in high schools. And so that's where the CDC has been like really, really, hitting it hard in the past few months, smacking JUUL on top of the head with a lot of fines because they marketed to teenagers. There was several polls that were done, I think, by Gallup and by other health outlets. Gallup is the largest polling organization in the world, and about 2/3 of high school kids now have JUULed or vaped at least once, which is a staggering number in the United States. So it's not that JUULs are bad, quote unquote. It's that they're getting into the hands of people that shouldn't be using them. JUULs are still a very effective way for smokers who have a very strong 2-pack-a-day addiction or pack-and-a-half-a-day addiction to remove a lot of the carcinogens that they would have been inhaling on those cigarettes. Despite the filter that's on those cigarettes, you're still inhaling all that tar. You're still inhaling the chemicals and it's getting into your lungs, and it can cause those mutations that can cause cancer. The stats are, if I remember correctly, about half of the people in their lifetime that smoke over a certain amount of years will contract some form of lung cancer. Of course, that the predictive power behind that is fairly reasonable. You could smoke your entire life and never get cancer, but you might be one of the fortunate ones, So as used as a way for people to stop smoking, if that's the intent, paired with something like maybe Chantix, which is a drug that reduces nicotine cravings, then it's effective and it should be out there for those people. But marketing it to kids, the real problem with that is nicotine is a dangerous chemical to the developing mind. And so when you expose the adolescent mind and teenagers, 14, 15, 16, even all the way up into our 20s, because our brains don't stop developing until about 26. If you expose consistently an addictive chemical like nicotine to the adolescent mind, what will happen is it'll decrease impulse control, it'll increase risk, it also does things that impact memory and memory loss, motivation goes down. And so these are dangerous things. It's not necessarily that because you JUUL, all those things are going to happen to you. The data is not exactly 100% causal yet, but that's what we know as of right now. And so the idea is keep that out of the hands of the kids until they're ready enough and old enough to make the decision for themselves. And so that's the thing that the CDC has been hitting these companies over the head with right now.
Yeah, the majority of these kids or people probably wouldn't have nicotine addiction if it wasn't for the JUULs. Like most kids.
Oh my God, yeah.
Most kids wouldn't start smoking cigarettes.
But is it really an addiction, or is it more of a social thing? Because you see it in colleges.
Yeah.
Everybody fucking has one. I went down to Miami, and that's the first time I ever saw a JUUL.
Yeah.
Dude, like people were walking around. They had these fucking USB sticks.
Yeah.
And
go
ahead.
So that's a very good point. It is very much a social thing, and so I've seen it. I mean, we've seen it in our social circles. Somebody's like, "Hey, take a hit," But in that same Gallup poll that I mentioned earlier, about 35% of those kids that have become addicted to nicotine did not know that what they were inhaling had nicotine in it, and so one JUUL pod has 20 times the nicotine content than a pack of cigarettes. Kids don't know that, but we know people in our social circles and people out there that go through 2, 3, 4 JUUL pods a day. That is very dangerous to the adolescent mind. And it's not dangerous in that you're going to go jump off a bridge or something like that. It's dangerous because, like I said, your impulse control, your decision-making capabilities, your rational thinking, has a tendency to decrease the longer that you use it. And so that's the problem. And so really what JUUL does is they take nicotine salts, and it's more effective at getting into the bloodstream and getting into the lungs. Whereas other companies before have just used nicotine. So the nicotine salts, whenever that stuff is vaporized, the way it gets into your body is a bit more potent. And so that's why JUUL has been hit so hard. Paired that with the fact that they're going after teenagers, or they were going after teenagers. That's why it's been such a controversial thing in the country recently.
So at the end of it, is it worse than cigarettes?
To say that it's worse than cigarettes is probably inaccurate. I would say that it is dangerous, but cigarettes have many more carcinogens, like far more carcinogens. And so your risk factor for getting cancer, later in life from smoking a JUUL versus smoking a cigarette is probably less.
Is there really much data on that, though? You know what I mean? Because, like, JUUL's been around for, like...
Yeah, there's not yet, because it's only been around for, 5-6 years?
We're basically guinea pigs to this whole e-cig stuff anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't know
We're the
that's
first
exactly
ones to
right.
actually experience it.
The problem with it is in different, not just JUUL, so different companies that market and that make these things, is the chemicals that they put inside the aerosols. We don't fully know how those things inhaled over a course of time will affect the human body. And so it's like you said, Danny, we're essentially guinea pigs.
Yeah.
We don't actually know. And so the evidence is inconclusive because we have not been able to do longitudinal studies on this. But we do know that cigarettes will cause cancer. The degree to which they cause cancer is to be determined by your genetic profile, by your resiliency of your genes, and how exposed you get to those chemicals. So that's why it's inconclusive. So that's why I say that it's probably less risk to use a JUUL or use any e-cig that is just pure nicotine, but the ones that are pure nicotine only are few and far between. I mean, there's not that many that are only pure nicotine.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the aerosols and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So far, people haven't really been affected with lung cancer and stuff like that from the JUULs, but a lot of reports have been showing, like in pictures I've seen, like mouth sores and stuff like that on the roof of the mouth and burns.
Yes.
And is that from like the aerosols?
It can definitely be. So a lot of them have, I think, one of the chemicals is like propylene glycol and things that cause these very severe
That's like the burn you
burns.
feel, right?
Yeah. And then there's also a really big thing right now that the CDC is pushing is there's I don't know, it might be a bacteria or a virus that you can get from sharing JUUL pods and from sharing JUULs
Like
between
STDs
people.
and stuff like that too.
Almost like that, yeah. It's like cross contaminations and whatnot. That becomes a big problem. It's not necessarily, once again, the nicotine that you should be worried about. Nicotine won't cause cancer. The data on that, I'm pretty sure that is well established, is nicotine does not show a causal relationship with cancer. But what it does have the potential of doing is, like I said, risk tolerance, risky behaviors, memories, motivation, decision making, all that stuff is really, really affected by nicotine consumption. And when you're consuming 20 times more than a pack of cigarettes a day, and you're doing it 3 or 4 times a day, that's when it gets bad. And so a lot of people are also concerned about being a gateway. So the JUUL's not enough. And so that burn that I get from the JUUL, well, now I want to pair it with like a cigarette, and that's a gateway into smoking cigarettes. And so that's why it's been pushed so heavily against. And then of course too the influence of like I think JUUL, the controlling stake in JUUL, or like a large portion of JUUL, was just bought by Marlboro like this past year. So now they have an incentive to sell their product, which is nicotine. That's what keeps people addicted, is the nicotine. Because if there was no nicotine, people probably wouldn't smoke, But now they have even a larger interest of making sure that people buy their product.
So these like big corporations, what you're saying is they care about money more than health, because they're pushing more about they're pushing the product out to people that they know shouldn't be taking this.
Yeah, I mean the bottom line in this country, sad to say, like we live in a capitalistic society, which I have nothing to say against capitalism. There are pros and cons to every single economic structure. But in capitalism, the goal, especially if you're a publicly traded company, the goal is to make money for your shareholders and to make money for yourself. And so how do you do that? You sell. Well, how do you sell? You get people addicted.
Yeah.
That's one way. You see the same thing with caffeine. Caffeine is the most popular drug in the world, the most widely distributed drug in the world. And almost, how many people do you know that don't
I'd say
consume
75% of people probably.
Yeah,
like that.
everyone consumes caffeine for the most part. So
Is it really a drug though?
It is a drug.
Yeah, it's
it is a drug.
yeah.
It is a stimulant, because when you're on caffeine, it'll increase your heart rate, it'll increase your focus, your concentration, your alertness. That's why it's in pre-workout. It's not in pre-workout because it improves your fitness performance. It's there because you can focus. Like it helps you focus.
So today I learned I'm a fucking drug addict. basically.
Shout out caffeine. Shout out caffeine.
Shout out caffeine for making the Well, I mean,
I'm a
sometimes
drug addict.
Sometimes caffeine isn't enough. That's when you get into things like cocaine. Honestly, cocaine will do things to you and that's when the risk factor increases because caffeine and cocaine do similar things biochemically, but the degree to which cocaine does it is
Well, does caffeine
much
release
more
dopamine
different.
the same?
Oh, it'll release dopamine, it'll release serotonin, it'll release a bevy of neurotransmitters, and the degree to which it releases those neurotransmitters is like completely higher than what caffeine would do. So that's where it can cause a very strong addiction so quickly.
But it'll also it's kind of like you also get the headaches when you become addicted to it.
Exactly.
Say you don't have coffee, like it's noon, you got a coffee headache instantly.
Yeah.
At least I get it.
Those are withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bro,
So-
I drink like a fuck ton of coffee, and by like 10 a.m., I drink at like 6 a.m., 10 a.m., my head hurts, everything. You just drink another one.
Remember, like 2 years
We
ago,
back
you
at it.
wouldn't drink coffee. You drink like green tea and stuff like that. And then
I started drinking tea.
Then you
Yeah.
came to the corporate world.
No,
started-
because when you start working, bro, you need that shit.
You need
like,
the coffee, man. It's,
you wake up
You're-
early.
You're raised to think you need it because you see everybody else doing it. You see it helping them. But think about it, when you were a kid, you didn't need it. You
But
had
did I
energy
work, though?
all day?
Yeah,
You
I
did
never
I
job
work?
as a kid.
When you went to school as a kid in elementary school,
But-
that's basically work. You're there 8 hours of the day.
Yeah,
But
but
it
I come
require
home
focus
and
either.
and I
It
come
does
home and I
require
play.
focus. You had
Elementary
homework,
school?
You had to learn stuff.
You had homework. I was playing video games.
Yeah, and then
Came
you
home,
come
played
home.
outside.
Yeah, college you come home and you come home from work and then you go to school or whatever and then you got to stay up all night. So what helps you? Coffee.
It's caffeine, yeah. And
Yeah.
the degree to which so a cup of tea has about 35 milligrams of caffeine on average. A cup of coffee, you're pushing 75 to 80. 8 ounces of Red Bull, you're pushing 120. A Monster, like one of those big monsters, you're pushing 180. A Rockstar, you're pushing 215.
So what's the difference between like
I stay away from
coffee? Because like I drink black coffee, just black. It sounds healthier than fucking drinking like a Red Bull, and I feel better when I drink coffee rather than Red Bull. So what's the difference? Because they both have caffeine.
Well, it's the actual compound, right? And so it's not just the caffeine that's in there. So if you drink black coffee straight, no cream, no sugar, no additives, no mixtures, no nothing, you're drinking actually a pretty healthy substance. Like caffeine it's not bad for you. There are studies out there that discuss the benefits of drinking coffee. It is a known thing. The literature on that has been established. But Red Bull, you've got other things in there. Not just Red Bull, Monsters, Rockstars, other energy drinks, Bangs, whatever, what have you. They've got other chemicals in there and a lot of other sugars too that can cause you that crash feeling. Whereas you're drinking black coffee, there's nothing else in it except for the caffeine and then the benefit of the coffee. So I hope that answers your question.
But it's like anything, you drink too much and
It'll cause an addiction. It can cause it to be bad. But then the thing too about drinking black coffee is you're not adding anything to it. You're not adding your 50-50 half and half creamers. You're not adding all the extra sugars. You know.
just adding a little bit of blood pressure.
Well, yeah, you
It
might raise
raises
your blood pressure, a bit.
but it's not dangerous. I think it's like, what is it, 1.6 grams or 16 grams of caffeine to actually stop the heart.
Yeah, it can stop the heart, and so
Yeah.
like if you'd have to consume copious amounts of like energy drinks to really do some damage to your heart.
Or
But yeah,
caffeine pills.
Caffeine pills will do it too. Yeah, because it increases the heart rate, and you'll go into tachycardia. Like you will have a heart attack if you drink too much caffeine. But for you to consume that amount of caffeine, you have
You'd have
to
to try.
drink a lot of
You
caffeine.
won't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you have to
Randomly.
You
like.
start abusing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And usually people don't do it because then you start seeing some negative side effects. You'll get really bad headaches, can cause cluster headaches, can cause migraines. And so yeah, usually you don't see people abusing it to that degree.
So drink black coffee rather than Red Bull and all that other bullshit.
Well, and once again too, I mean, your body becomes acclimated, right? So like Denny said, you started drinking green tea, and then you went up.
Then he will move from green tea to coffee. I promise it.
I used to drink coffee. I
You went back.
stopped
Oh, you
drinking.
tapered off.
Yeah, I stopped.
He works less too. So
He works at 8
Yeah,
a.m.
I
bro.
work
We're up at
every
7.
day.
The rest of us are up at 7
I
a.m.
work every day, 6 days a week.
Yeah. No, but it is good, and so some people need that pick-me-up because, in this country, it's all about productivity, so you wake up in the morning, you need, you're tired, maybe you don't want to wake up, and so what's the thing that'll get you going? I need my coffee, man.
That is true.
We'll get you going for sure.
Yep.
Helps me. So dealing with like caffeine and stuff, you're talking about it helps with school and stuff. How do you really feel about school? You think it's for everybody or no?
I really don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. See, so when you grow up in this country, or just in society, Western culture in general, the questions are, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what would you like to do with your life? Or what's your major going to be when you get to college? And those are all fair questions to ask. But not everyone is a good student, and that's okay. Now, what should change in this country is the degree to which we care for our teachers. A much stronger emphasis needs to be put on training and supporting our faculty and staff rather than assuming that, broad scale across the board programs like No Child Left Behind, for example, just one, not bashing on anyone's political ideology.
Yeah.
But that's going to be the stopgap, that's going to be the fix, because it's not. You have to invest in the teacher, because think about it. When you guys were going through school, the best teachers made the highest level of impact, and the worst teachers made you not want to even go to class. Yeah.
Or it makes
That's
you want to
true.
slap them.
Well, hopefully you don't get like an assault charge. But yeah, I mean, teachers. There was a really big study done by a researcher at the universities, one of the universities in Australia, and the largest causal factor causal data, not correlational, not anecdotal data, that they found was the degree to which the teacher was effective. An effective teacher increased student success factor, and it was a longitudinal study, by as much as 33% over the lifetime of that child. So effective teachers is what we need. And how do you get effective teachers? Well, you have to increase the degree to which you invest in the teachers. The best companies have the best employees. How do they get the best employees? They invest in their employees. Yeah. You got to look at education the same way. Kids might have a better shot of going through school and finding a career that they can make a respectable middle-class living out of if that is their goal. Not everybody's a good student, though. Some people, it's okay for them to go into trade schools. Some people, it's okay if they don't know anything,
Yeah.
It's okay if not everyone is going to have a grandmaster plan or a grandmaster ambition. Like, not everyone wakes up at 14 and says, I want to do this or I want to do that. Some people just don't know. And we don't need to demonize those kids. We need to support them. We need to say, that's okay. You'll find your way. We're going to help you. We'll try different things to help you out. If you don't go into college having your life figured out at 18 years old, you're supposed to be, have your entire life figured out at 18 years old, and you're going to accumulate $80,000 worth of student loans if you don't get a scholarship or grants.
Don't go.
I wouldn't go if I was ready.
I'm not going to say that don't go, but I'm saying maybe think about that decision, because if you're doing it just because it's a social norm, I think you need to rethink that decision.
Yeah, for sure. Because you can do that social norm and not even go to college.
Exactly.
You can network with people that are in college. You don't even have to be in college.
Yeah.
Or if you try like you said, don't go to college. And then in 4 years down the line, you might know what you want to do. Let's say you work in a factory and you see the engineers up there.
Yeah.
And you're interested in that shit, go back to college.
Yeah. And then those people who are technically experts in their field, they expose you to some level of education. Yeah. And then you see, this really piques my interest. I want to learn more. Maybe you go buy a Engineering for Dummies book. Or, you stop by at your local Barnes & Noble and you read through it a little bit and you're like, man, this is really interesting. I want to learn more about this. And then you apply, you get in, you take some classes. You're like, yeah, this is really what I want to do. I agree with that, but pushing kids into colleges because it is the cultural norm. We've seen that in this country, because in the 70s and 80s, it used to be in order for you to get a middle-class family, you have to have a college degree. In order for you to have a respectable, comfortable, secure living, you have to have a college degree.
Yeah.
Today, there's an oversaturation in the workforce of college degrees. It depends, of course, on the degree that which you get. So engineers are always needed. Physicians, always needed.
Doctors.
Nurses, doctors, these things are needed. Law right now used to be a great degree. Law is oversaturated. Yeah. Think about how many lawyers we have.
There's no turnover rate in that. Yeah.
There's an attorney on every single corner.
There is.
And if you're not top 5-10% of your class, if you don't get into a great firm to work as an intern, they're gonna ride you for like 80 hours a week, and then you're gonna graduate. And if you don't get placed at a great firm, you might be making $40K a year as a lawyer. But then you got $200,000 of student loans.
Yep.
The problem is we sign for too many loans too quickly in this country without thinking, we got to pay it back. The government's going to take care of it for us. We'll get our student loans. No. You signed a legal obligation. You took debt. Yeah. You got to pay for it. Yeah. And so that's what I think. We need to support our kids more from a younger age. Support our teachers. Show them that it's okay not to want to go to college. I'm not going to teach you as though you're not going to college, though. You don't know if you're going to college or not. Nobody knows the future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I'm going to give you the fair shot. We teach every man's child in this country. That's different. We hear a lot of statistics about America's, 18th in literacy or 24th in math. Well, not all those other countries teach every man's child. Some of those schools are very tailored, for educating the best and brightest in the mathematics, or the best and brightest in the arts. The other guys are factory workers, or they're, in other fields. Yeah. In this country, we teach every man's child, unless the parents take him out of school.
I feel like people need to be exposed to the work environment, because I know when I was growing up, man, I thought an engineer was like, fuck, you're going to invent the next iPhone. Yeah. You're going to invent something. Yeah. And then you come in and you're like, you're working in a factory, which most people are like, what the fuck, I'm working in a factory. But you're working in an office. It's more of an office job. Yeah. You're on Excel 24/7.
100%.
So, like, I think
agree.
people need to be exposed to that.
At a younger age too.
Yeah, definitely. Because the way that you experience is the best teacher. You know,
Yeah,
like you
100%.
guys know, you're doing it right now with the podcast. You've done it with other business endeavors in your life. I mean, just other things that are not even entrepreneurial in nature.
Yeah.
Experience is the best teacher. So how do you show a kid what he wants to do if he has never been exposed to that field? What's he like? I want to be a doctor because I watched House and I watched Grey's Anatomy and I watched Scrubs. No, dude, that's not real medicine. That's not how stuff happens. You know, medicine is dirty and ugly sometimes, and sometimes it is elegant and beautiful. Not what you see on TV.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a drama where people are, doing whatever in the janitor closet. Like, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't go like that. So, and then the same thing. So that's one thing where I agree. For education in this country, we have to, adapt how we teach our kids. So like one thing that I know in Germany, whenever you go to gymnasium, high school, you've got 3 days or 4 days that are devoted to class, and then the rest of them you're in practice some of those half days. Like you're going to those locations, you're actually on site, interning, learning at the high school level.
Yeah.
We don't get into internships until we're in college here in the States.
And some people don't even do
that's late
internships in
college.
college.
And that's late college. By the
Yeah.
time you've accumulated 3-4 years of credits,
Yeah.
you got debt. If you've been fortunate to have a scholarship, well, okay, now I got to switch because I don't like it, but I wasted my scholarship.
Yeah, wasted
that's
3
true.
years of life.
Wasted 3 years of my
Everything good.
life. The good thing about school is that, technically no one can ever take that knowledge away from you. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to follow that life plan that we are all ingrained with from a young age, grow up, go to school, get married, have kids, make a family, this, then, if you're pushing by 25, 27 and you're not married and, you don't have your career figured out and you see your peers are, it's going to make you feel bad about yourself.
start
It
panicking
really
a little
could.
bit,
And so
yeah.
you start panicking, and that's where we see some issues in this country right now. So, definitely education is important, but we need to, revamp the education system and how we get our teachers, how we train our teachers, how invested we are in them, and then the kids too. It's okay if you don't want to go to college. It's okay not to have it all figured out at 18, at 16. That's okay. We're going to support you anyway. Here's what we got. You can do this. You can do that. Get into it. Get your hands dirty. Figure out if you like it or not.
Yeah.
Get in with the companies. Observe. And if you don't like it, that's okay too. You can do other things. In America, man, the American dream is still alive. Here we are, the four of us. Look at our parents, how they came here. Look what they came from.
Yeah.
We're living examples of the American dream.
That's true.
So it's still alive. You just have to be resourceful and get the right information to make sure that you're not wasting your money and your time, because time's the most precious resource, man. Once that's gone, you can never get it back.
That's true.
Do you think this social norm of stuff going to college and having all these expectations kind of leads to people having so much anxiety and depression and stuff like that?
I think so, yeah, especially if your parents are involved, right? Because they have this expectation of you, to really perform, and if they're paying for it too, you feel guilt. You can feel guilt
Yeah.
or a certain level of responsibility, like, damn, my dad just invested $50K, I need to do this to make him proud, to honor his sacrifice and his investment in me, and one day I'll return that investment in him when he gets old and he can't work anymore. I'm going to take care of you, pops,
Yeah.
That's when it can get really, really, you're torn between two worlds, because you might have other ambitions, but then you want to satisfy your parents, and that's where you can see some of that real problems, and especially in this country too, man. I mean, everywhere, like back in our home country in Boston, dude, mental health is not, it's very stigmatized.
That's why I say fuck. I mean, it sounds bad, but if your parents are holding you back, fuck the parents. Fuck everybody that's telling you. Do you, because at the end of the day, you're the one going in Monday to work. So, like, I feel like you shouldn't listen to your parents if they're taking it that far where they're dictating what you want to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like the tiger moms and
Yeah,
everything.
like you
I
can't tell
understand.
me what to do. You can't tell. They're trying to live the life they wanted to live through you.
Yeah.
And mindsets aren't the same, so.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate that kind of stuff happens, because ideally you have a strong family that is together, that is close-knit, and that will support you in your endeavors, that provides some degree of guidance, because no matter how invincible we feel at times, no matter how smart, intelligent, wise we feel, experience is ultimately the best teacher. And that's something that they do have on us, regardless of how little school they've had or how much school they've had. They do have some level of experience. And so it is important to listen to your parents, but hopefully you have a relationship established with them to which you can sit down and talk to them and be like, Mom, Dad, this isn't for me. Like, no disrespect to you guys. I love you guys. I'm going to support you, and you guys have supported me, but this is not for me. And I need you to respect that, because I respect your sacrifice, but I can do other things, and this is not it for me, And so, but sometimes, of course, that stuff doesn't happen, and that's when you get tension and anxiety.
I think it's because all of us, our parents grew up in a whole different world, so is the experience the same? You know what I mean? If they grew up in this society, like, dude, we can do everything with the internet. And, like, I don't think they realize that. They think of, like, this job, like, we need security. We need...
They have this different image of what school is. I went to school, college, not just, like, high school. I'm like, what the fuck did I come here for today?
Yeah.
What did I gain from being in this class today? I only came because my dad's paying for it.
Yeah.
Literally, like, even with, like, gen eds and stuff like that, like, you gain nothing from that stuff. I mean, yeah, you get a little knowledge, whatever, like, general knowledge in business.
Yeah.
You dissect the frog.
I dissected the hell out of some animals with my degree, man. I feel horrible. I love animals.
Yeah, and you know that is definitely a hot ticket point. You know, so general education. You know, in this country we have general education requirements, and I understand the need for general education. To a certain degree, everyone should have basic instruction on a lot of topics so they can be well versed and carry conversations, you know, so you're not so specialized in your area that you don't know about anything else.
Yeah,
you know, that makes sense. On the contra side to that, you have a pressure that is put on you from the federal government that says that you have to do this, you have no choice. That's something that I don't agree with, because you know, I'm a big proponent of, you know, liberties and, you know, of the right to choose and of freedoms. And so if you're compelling me against my will to do something that I don't want to do, well then that's not right, you know. So at the core of it, you know, you should have the right to choose what you want to do. You know, it is necessary, because imagine if you had an electorate, a voting body that's supposed to be making complex political decisions, but not everyone has the same level of education, you know. That's where you get people who are more educated or more specialized making decisions for everyone else, and that's when you can get really hairy decisions made, because then it's going to benefit for them, but it's no benefit for everybody else.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, that's basically what politics is.
Yeah,
that's all politics is.
Yeah, I mean, not just politics, man. Every other field, you're not going to have, you know, a scientist who's well versed in academic literature, you know, who writes on a very advanced level, and then he's going to come down and you know, he's going to go and try to be a mergers and acquisitions, you know, accountant or something like that. No, because those people speak different languages almost, you know. Their literacy is so advanced in that topic that they're the only ones that can do that type of stuff. They police themselves, you know. Academia polices itself. Accountants, you know, that type of world, lawyers, they all write in a certain way that is their literacy, that they police themselves, you know, like only those type of people can understand those topics. For the everyday person, for your farmer, for your small farmer that's, you know, mining, that's farming, you know, corn, no, man, he's not going to understand that stuff
at all.
But I think everybody should also have their role kind of in the world too. Like,
oh yeah,
you wouldn't
be
specialized. I think that creates more harmonious, like, environment for everybody.
Yeah, because you can't, I mean, so this gets into a really cool comparison between the USA and China. And so, you know, a lot of our manufacturing is in China. And I think either Tim Cook or Steve Jobs spoke on this a while ago. But they said, you know, the reason why so much manufacturing is in China is not just because of the price. Of course, price matters, bottom dollar matters, but because of the degree to which the workers are specialized. You know, we can do so many things for manufacturing in China that we cannot do in the United States, because what our workers in the U.S. are good at is multitasking, is pivoting. You know, like for example, if you guys go to Chick-fil-A, right, or any other restaurant. Yeah. Imagine being on the line, controlling everything that those workers are doing. The Chinese workers are so specialized in what they do that if you put them in that position, they will need one person for each individual role. That is how the Chinese culture is. That is how their economy is set up, to be highly, highly specialized. So in the U.S., where you have one person that's a manager, you would need 4 people to do a manager to do that person's job if they came from the Chinese system, the way that they do stuff. And that's just one example. Of course, those numbers are kind of just pulled out of nowhere. Yeah. But that's the way that they do stuff in China. Very highly specialized, but what they do, they're great at. In the U.S., we take a more rounded approach, and so everyone should be, you know, it's like kind of like being between jack of all trades, master of none, type thing. Yeah. And if you want to become a master, then you got to go to more school. You know, you got to be much more well-versed in a topic area to become a master of a trade.
So would you say that system would kind of make things better quality, like better?
So for the manufacturing industry, definitely, but we just can't compete price-wise.
So why do people like kind of say like, say, this tool or this thing's from China, it's a piece of shit made in China?
Yeah. So
is that like a patriotic thing or?
Kind of, yeah. So I mean, it depends on where the sourcing is from and what the manufacturing is coming from, right? So if you've got, I I saw it with Craftsman when I was working at Sears. They outsourced all of the manufacturing from the U.S. to China, and then you had people that were coming back, and it was like, hey, these tools are breaking all the time. Well, the reason that they're breaking is because the Craftsman tools that you got in the 70s and then in the 80s were made to last.
Yeah,
you know?
that is
Now
true.
it's about the bottom dollar. And so the materials that they're using is less durable, you know, it's prone to more breaking. So, but it's made in China now, and so you have people associating that type of stuff with
China.
China.
Which I actually
That's
worked at Sears with Dennis, and he was in like the home appliances. I was in the hardware section, so I got to deal with all these customers. So say the Craftsman has like their lifetime warranty. So if someone brings a tool in, you have to fix it for them, like a ratchet or whatever.
Can you tell about the guy that brought in brought in the machine that's trying to buy it off the shelf?
Okay, so we had like a DeWalt, it was like a circular saw, a power saw, and this dude takes like the display machine off the shelf, puts it in his cart. I'm like, sir, what are you doing? He's like, I was gonna check this out. He goes, no. I put it back on the shelf, get him a brand new box, he put it in his cart, help him, and this dude just walks right out the door. What? He just stole it. Instead of getting the old used.
No, you stole it.
I didn't steal it.
You stole
You
it.
did steal it.
Oh, you helped them steal it.
Yeah.
You forgot that he didn't ring
So
it out.
Sears, I mean,
No,
you
so
gotta.
Sears, gotta
gotta talk.
Sears doesn't exist anymore. They
Yeah,
closed
Dan,
down.
how do you feel about them, that Chapter 11 bankruptcy, bro?
They're bankrupt, man. I got more money than them.
Meldon's cause of that. He helped.
I know.
You contributed to
blame,
Yeah,
bankruptcy.
he contributed to it.
Blame me.
That's our shrink right there.
So talking about the corporates like Sears and all that, another level, we want to talk about the little medicine corporations.
Back in your special field, we kind of straight off topic a little bit. But let's go back to your field. How do you feel about there's a lot of cases right now about measles, whooping cough, stuff like that, kind of diseases we got rid of a long time ago coming back because of anti-vax moms.
Yeah.
Is what people call them.
This infuriates me. And I have to compose myself because we're on camera. And I don't
Yeah.
want to say anything because this is going to be out on the internet. And I'm going to have students and I'm going to have to deal with these people.
You're gonna have an RF at your neck.
Oh, God. So what people don't know about vaccination is that this type of stuff has been around for centuries. Okay, the principle behind vaccination started in China, in ancient Egypt, with smallpox. So smallpox still is a very, very dangerous disease. It kills people almost 1 in 10 times, but it causes extreme pain. It's fever and all these pustules and stuff that form. And so what they would do, Chinese and the Egyptians, what they would do is they would take the scabs of people that had smallpox and they would crush them up and grind them and expose people that wanted to get inoculated. The term was called inoculation. They would expose people to that stuff. And the idea was you inhale some of the small, tiny bits of that virus and your body then builds up an immunity to it. That's inoculation. The virus is live. And that's the way it started in ancient China and Egypt. Today, we still have that same principle except it's vaccination, but we don't give you a live virus. And so the reason why some of those diseases that you mentioned, the reason why we stopped seeing them is because in the U.S. specifically, in the 50s and 60s, we saw a huge surge of vaccination.
Yeah.
So Jonas Salk with the polio vaccine. People have never seen what polio looks like in this country, or very seldomly. Like they have to Google what image,
FDR had it, correct?
FDR had it, but that's about the extent to which people would know what polio looks like. Is FDR was in a wheelchair. He hated being photographed. There were very few pictures of FDR because he did not like being seen.
He's always behind his desk.
Always behind his desk. Yeah. But the thing about vaccines is they're a victim of their own success because people don't know what measles looks like, what mumps look like, what rubella looks like, what polio looks like, what smallpox looks like, what other diseases, whooping cough, what these things can do to people. They're a victim of their own success. In the United States, we saw that huge surge of vaccination in the 50s and 60s, and the CDC data tells us immediately the incidence of cases decreased precipitously in this country. Recently, the scare has come from a paper that was published in, I think, either 96 or 98 by a former doctor. His name was Andrew Wakefield, I think. In the United Kingdom, he published in a very reputable academic journal called Lancet. And he supposedly found a correlation, not causal data, between the MMR vaccine, so measles, mumps, and rubella, and autism. And what he proposed was a mechanism of sorts that said that the MMR vaccine caused some type of mutation in the stomach lining and the GI tract of people that got the vaccine that caused them to then get autism. And that was published. And so that passed an editorial review board, and it was a peer-reviewed journal. So other scientists reviewed it, and they allowed it to go to publication. Until 2 years later, Lancet had to retract that paper because and they were really embarrassed. The retraction in academia is like that is the the peak of we're embarrassed. This is 100% wrong. Yeah. He had to retract that information, but it was already too late. The information was already out there, and so it was widely discredited, disproved. They recreated his experiments and data and found that he falsified his research.
So this is why people think vaccination can give you autism.
Yeah, basically. In addition to that, there was another scare like in the early 2000s and the mid 2000s with this chemical called thimerosal, and it had trace amounts of mercury. But what people don't understand is the CDC establishes guidelines by which you can include harmful chemicals. And so, for example, I'll give you a general example. So 1% acetic acid. If I said that to the general person walking down the street today, probably like, what the heck are you talking about? What is that? I'm like, it's vinegar. Acetic acid is vinegar. Okay, 10% acetic acid will burn your skin. And so the degree to which you increase the concentration of something greatly affects how it works in the body. And so when people heard that thimerosal was used as a preservative in vaccines, so I'm being injected with this preservative while I'm receiving the vaccine, but that's got mercury in it, and mercury is known to do this and that to the brain, they also freaked out. But what they didn't realize is the degree to which that mercury was in the thimerosal was like 200 parts per million, like the unit was parts per million. And so the criteria by which the CDC said you have to be under this line in order to be safe was like exponentially lower than what it should have been in the first place. And so that was another big scare. And then you have celebrities, right? So Jenny McCarthy is really big with this. Donald Trump, before he was elected, by the way, was also part of the anti-vax movement. Jim Carrey.
Makes sense that Trump was in it. So.
Yeah, well, they take these ideas and they propagate them. And so what you have is, people saying that their kids have autism because they got vaccines. If vaccines caused autism, all of us would have autism.
Yeah.
But what exactly is autism? There's no test for autism. There's a spectrum of autism behaviors, And so to say that, vaccines cause autism is entirely irresponsible, because when you're not just risking your child, you're not just risking them against their will, because you may not know, you know what I'm saying? You're risking other people's kids, because there's this principle called herd immunity, right? So the virus cannot reproduce and replicate and move on from person to person if everyone is inoculated against it, right? But if you stop vaccinating, then this person gets sick, and then he can make the person that was not vaccinated also get sick. And then if you have an increasing body of people that are not that have not been caught up on their immunizations, then they can get that virus will spread.
So basically, we're just like reversing everything we worked so long and hard for all those years to get rid of, like all these diseases.
Exactly,
we're reversing that.
That's exactly right. And I will say this too, that the medical community tries to educate people about this topic, but we're just not doing a good enough job with it. So one of the largest ones is influenza vaccine. So in 1916 or 1918, Spanish influenza killed like 20 million people. It wasn't that long ago. It was about 100 years ago. It's not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. At all. We get flu vaccines, marketed every single year. Go get your flu vaccine. You'll hear plenty of stories from people that say, I got my flu vaccine and I got sick.
Dude, but I also think that, like, y'all two worked in a pharmacy. Yeah. And damn right, the pharmacist or whoever's the main guy, it may not be him pushing, like, get a vaccine. I think they're pushing it just for money. Like,
of course,
for some part. There's some people, like pharmacists, whatever, because those pharmacists ain't pushing it for themselves. There's probably somebody above them that it's like, you better get a quota of this many vaccines. You know what I mean?
Well, the pharmacists we worked with, they all individually got the flu shot themselves. They got the flu shot, which is the one they're required to get. Not required. They chose to get that one.
I mean, it's not going to hurt them, but I think that it's pushed out for business. So, like, if you're going to tell your employee, like, dude, push on this vaccine on, people that come in, why would I get it? You know what I mean? Because
here's the thing too. We gotta give respect to the fact that it's not just one or the other. It can be a multifactorial thing. You know what I'm saying? It can be, yes, big pharma wants its profits. Yes, the pharmacist has to meet the metric that the district manager says that they have to meet. And yes, they are healthcare professionals that know that it is a responsible thing for people to do. And so, of course, our economy is driven by sales. So, yes, they have to meet those quotas and whatnot, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're still healthcare professionals. You don't become a healthcare professional for no reason. Some people look at it for money. In order for you to subject yourself to 8 years of grueling school, it has to be for more than something than just money. Because that's not going to get you up out of the day. You have to have a desire, a want to help people, to treat them with medicine. Yeah. And so if you know that the science is conclusive, like we know vaccines do not cause autism. Vaccines are beneficial, and vaccines will stop these diseases from propagating throughout the population. then of course you as a medical professional will say, okay, yeah, ma'am, you're 65. You should really get the high dose flu vaccine this year to, it impacts, older people a bit more stronger than it does younger people. Your immune system is starting to get weaker. You should really get this vaccine because I want you to be taken care of. At the same time, you're fulfilling your other roles, as a pharmacist, as the business side of it too, yes. But sometimes those lines become very blurred. And that's where you have, conflicting motives and some things. So I do agree with that, yeah. But at the same time, it's not just the black or white. There's a lot of gray in between there that I think should.
Because some people have gotten sick. Like what you said earlier, like people come in saying, I got sick from the flu vaccine. I wasn't sick before. Also, like causation isn't correlation.
That's
very true.
What if they're injecting you with something that's neutral, that literally just goes through your body, is
like
cheap as
placebo,
fuck,
and
they're just putting something into you that's cheap as fuck, not cheap as fuck, but like something that costs less than normal vaccine.
The thing about the flu shot, I think like 90, like I don't know the real number, like majority of instances will cover it, completely, fully cover it. The only vaccines that aren't covered are like Hep C, Hep B, stuff like that you contract otherwise.
You brought up Hep. They pushed hepatitis vaccines for fucking here in Bowling Green. They pushed it for years.
Yeah.
But have you ever known somebody that got it? Have you? You personally?
I work at a pharmacy, so yes.
I mean, that's different. A normal person. Have you ever?
Anybody to get Hep C, Hep B, those are diseases contracted through certain types of lifestyles as well, not just through genetics and lifestyles, not just kind of through anything. I can't cough on you and give you Hep C.
But if there's such a fucking big outbreak, why haven't I experienced it? Or like I've asked people like in my
there wasn't one in my circle, locally, though.
But like I worked at Trace, and dude, you go there and they're talking about this huge outbreak, this and that, and I interact with a lot of people. I go to Western, I work, I interact with a lot of people. So why haven't I seen it? Well, why hasn't Denny seen it?
I'd say that's more of like media. The easiest thing to report on is negative things. So you have an outbreak of something. That's why people say like you watch the news, you only hear bad things. It's because that's what's easy to report. You don't have to do any research on it. You don't have to like look through it. Just say this stuff's killing people.
But how do you know it's happening?
I mean,
because if you work at a pharmacy, you're gonna see hepatitis anyway. Period. Yeah. Like you work there, you're gonna see it eventually. You might not see it like next week or something, but you're gonna see it. Like somebody like me and Denny, if it's such a big outbreak, how come we don't see it?
Like anybody would know. I think it was the surrounding
That's
counties.
the thing. It's really not. It's not really a big outbreak because a lot of people are inoculated or immune to hepatitis C. And like Melvin was saying, the lifestyle, you have to transfer through bodily fluids.
Yeah.
So I can't just look at you and cough on you and give you hepatitis C. Like bodily fluids, my dude. You know what I'm saying?
Like needles, stuff like that. Like
yeah, you're sharing needles.
So why is it pushed? Why is it pushed that much though? I think it's more of a business perspective.
Hep C wasn't pushed. Hep C wasn't pushed on. It was Hep A. Hep A was like in like some boony school around the area, I guess. I don't no disrespect, but it was a small area, a rural area. I think there was like an outbreak of a few students had Hep C, not Hep C, Hep A. I'm sorry, and they contracted it through their home life. They got that, and then the media took that story and kind of made it seem like 1,000 people in Bowling Green had.
You think the companies weren't behind the media because all that is a big marketing tactic.
They were
bro. Because that's a huge marketing.
All the information that you see that comes through on mainstream media that we see on TV is heavily filtered, and that message is entirely directed to the constituents that watch those TV shows. And so yeah, of course, man, the media in this country is controlled by two families. And I'm not gonna name call, but I mean, if you all you gotta do is just Google who owns, Fox, who owns NBC, who owns CNN. They're all owned by the same people. So if you're pushing an agenda, if you've got your finger in multiple pots, and one of them's the pharmaceutical industry, you better believe that they're gonna push some type of an agenda, and they're gonna mask it as a public health scare, right? Yeah.
So should we listen to them, and should we get the hep shot?
What you should listen to is the medical professionals, not necessarily what you see on TV, because we know. So this is the problem with getting back to the flu vaccine, because Hep A and Hep B are totally different, and Hep C is totally different. So flu, what the CDC does each year is they try to predict using biological statistical models which strains of the influenza virus are going to hit strongest this year based on these conditions, based on profile, based on all these other things, and they try to project that ahead of time. And then they manufacture the flu vaccine. They give the directions to the manufacturers on how to make the flu vaccine and which strains to cover against, which will cover 3 or 4 strains. But that's not predict. You know what I'm saying? It's very, very well possible, which we've seen several times, that the strains that you were immunized against, that you received inoculation against, were not the ones that hit. And so you've been inoculated against the flu, but now there's a flu outbreak. Well, it was because the strains that the CDC predicted just didn't happen, that has happened in the past.
Usually we got the swine flu and the bird flu. That's where those came from.
In addition to that,
I think it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, because if they keep pushing all this shit out, you're gonna have people that are against it, because like if you have tornado warnings every day, are you really gonna fucking listen to them? Eventually you're gonna. So like I think that's where these anti-vaccine people are coming from. Is like, dude, you're telling me to fucking get vaccinated for every goddamn thing.
Well, I will say to the degree to which you see in the anti-vax stuff, it's always tied to some type of autism this, autism that, some type of disease, and it's just not substantiated whatsoever. There's no data. There's virtually zero data out there that supports the notion that vaccines cause autism. And yet you still have people, influencers, celebrities, pushing that notion, and then people tie onto that. And then you mix in those blurred lines that I mentioned earlier, and it just seems suspicious, right? And then you get this distrust in the industry. You get this distrust in the professionals. You're like, that's not for me. I don't look right. I don't feel right. And that's where that type of stuff happens, because it's not just one factor. These things are so complex, so multifactorial, and when you break it down, you got to give respect to all those things. You know what I'm saying? So, but the evidence is clear. Vaccines don't cause autism, and the reason we know that is because if it did, the people, billions of vaccines have been given. We would all have it. And then the notion that everybody has some degree of autism is honestly BS too, because no, you can't test for autism. There's a spectrum of behaviors, and even then, not everybody falls on the spectrum.
So you think it's misdiagnosed, autism a lot, or? Well,
the problem is we just don't have a way to diagnose it, So people still argue about what autism is, what's an autistic behavior, what's not an autistic behavior. Obviously, you have the higher ends of the spectrum. You can tell that this kid is going to be autistic. Like, you can tell by his behavior. But then the lower ends, is it Asperger's? Is it autism? Is it just ADD? Like, what exactly is it that's causing it?
People don't realize that autism isn't that fucking, like... People think it's some crazy thing. You have really, really smart, intelligent people with autism. So, like, is it really that bad?
Yeah, I mean, so the problem with, like, high-functioning autistics, right? So what you'll see is, usually with high-functioning autistics, they have some crazy skill. They're amazing at doing something. So, like, I think a famous example, and I'm not sure if this is entirely accurate, so I'd have to think of a different example, but, like, Susan Boyle, for example. I've heard before, and I don't know if it's true, that she is a high-functioning autistic, but she is amazing at singing. And so you've seen other examples too, like they have these savants that they're math geniuses, they're whizzes, they've got IQs 4 standard deviations over the norm, but they're lacking in social impetus. They lack.
Which that's essential what autism is, kind of you're specialized in one area, but you have like your social skills are kind of
your
below
behavior.
But is that really bad to the society? Because if you got these people that are really specialized in their area, why is it bad?
I think we should adapt to it, like kind of help those people.
Everybody can't
in their
be social.
Fields. No, absolutely not.
It's not that it's bad for
Absolutely
society.
not.
It's just that I think the idea behind this anti-vax stuff, it's bad for the individual, and it's not given to them by their choice, so don't force them to do it. Yeah. Well, if you're going to public school, I don't want you to put my child at risk because you don't want to accept the science. Yeah, no. If you're going to accept a public product that is funded by public tax dollars, you're gonna vaccinate your kid, or you're not gonna go here. Go to a private school, and that's where you see outbreaks, right? So there's cases, there's reports of stuff going up in Minnesota or like Michigan and stuff, where parents have just been like, we're not gonna vaccinate our kids, and then they get exposed to whooping cough, and they all get whooping cough because their herd immunity was shot out the window. They're not all immunized, and so one of them gets infected, then the infection spreads. You don't see that type of stuff here, because you don't see polio. You don't see measles, you don't see mumps, you don't see rubella. You don't see these very strong diseases because we've all received immunizations against them. But I promise you, if all of our kids one day were not immunized, you'd see them come back.
Another outbreak.
Because that's what happens. These diseases find a way to come back. You ever seen smallpox?
It's not pretty, man.
Nope.
Never.
The reason you never seen smallpox, we got vaccinations for smallpox. You know what I'm saying? Meningitis, nasty disease. The meninges, which is it's like a tiny layer of almost skin. It's a membrane that's on top of the brain, becomes inflamed. So we all know what a brain looks like. Imagine it like, all these veins and everything and whatnot, and then it becomes inflamed and nasty and green and yellow and all this other infection on it. It's painful.
If you've never seen this stuff, how do you know it existed?
I've seen it.
We've seen it, just
there's been cases of it.
Documented cases.
In Lexington.
Oh, yeah.
We had a student come down from Lexington to our pharmacy, get his meningitis shot because he actually...
I'm talking about like smallpox. Like,
smallpox
we haven't seen it for a while.
We know what it looks like. We did documented cases of it. They use it as chemical weapons, too. The United States has a chemical weapon that's been developed off of smallpox. virus. They just don't ever use it because it's against the rules of engagement in warfare. You don't use chemical weapons, which is why all that stuff that was going on like overseas, like in Syria and stuff.
Yeah.
That's why that was bad. But yeah, I mean, we know it is because the vaccination was developed off of the disease being in the population. So like I said, in the early 1900s, influenza, Spanish influenza. Well, obviously you had to have seen that to develop a vaccination that got rid of it, you know?
Yeah.
Same thing for polio. Polio is still prevalent in Africa where they don't have access to the medication that we do in the States. Hepatitis, same thing. Measles, mumps, rubella, German measles is called as well. You see it all over the world where they don't have vaccinations present. And so the causal data is firmly established. Vaccines do not cause autism. Vaccines get rid of these diseases. Vaccinate your kids. It's that simple. The problem is where we have misinformation that spews. You know, it comes from these influencers and celebrities that think that they're pushing this agenda that's like, man, this is a giant conspiracy theory. And it's like, no, it's really not. It's really not. It's not that serious, dude. Just vaccinate your kids. Vaccinate yourself and you won't get sick.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. And of course, you got mixed motives. Sometimes you really do have mixed motives.
And the thing is, these celebrities have been vaccinated themselves.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, so that's kind of like,
everybody that's
That's the weird
against it
part.
has
Yeah.
been vaccinated.
they've been vaccinated.
And they're telling people not to vaccinate their kids.
Exactly. And then you better believe they're also vaccinating their kids
Yeah,
still.
100%.
You know? So you show me a famous celebrity that has, you know, all the money in the world, more money than they'll ever spend, that has not vaccinated their kids. And you might have like one martyr or something like that. No. Their kids are safe, you know. They've been vaccinated, and we should all continue to vaccinate.
100%.
They're actually working on a global flu vaccine right now that'll, once you take the flu vaccine, you should be good for about 5 years, and it covers most, if not all, flu strains, which you can still potentially get sick. What a lot of people don't know is you often hear that phrase that's called flu symptoms, right? Cold, fever, cold sweats, you know, etc. Well, the process by which your body becomes immune, so you're injected with this dead version of this virus. It's not alive. It's not going to reproduce or whatever. Then your immune system recognizes that it's foreign. It's an invader, okay? Then it sends its macrophages to attack. When the macrophages attack and then the B cells and T cells comes in, those are all part of your immune system. That process of attacking that virus takes a toll on your body. And so some of the side effects of that process are flu symptoms, but it's not actually flu. And so it is possible that you get a little under the weather from getting the vaccine. But it's not, I have the flu. No. Like, you know, like in Bosnia we say imam gripu. Well, gripa is flu. You know what I'm saying? It's not actually that you have the flu. You just have cold symptoms.
Yeah.
You can still get the rhinovirus. The rhinovirus is a common cold. But you don't have the influenza. Not your skin's not hurting. You know, you got a 103 fever. You know, you can't move. It's not that. It's not going to last for 2 weeks. It'll last for a couple days. And so people get that confused too, and they think they got sick from the vaccine. No, you've been inoculated against influenza, but you just got some cold symptoms to come with it.
Yeah. We've learned a lot from Dennis. I learned I'm a drug addict.
So is most of the world.
I'm an ex-drug addict.
And we've learned to get vaccinated, and we learned a lot. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the Timeless 10, which, Dennis, I don't know if you heard about it, but we asked the guests 10 questions that we ask everybody, and you kind of just answer them real quick.
Yeah, straight off the bat, just the answer. That's that.
So Milton's going to go ahead and do the Timeless 10.
All right. So if you had to work but you didn't need the money, what career would you choose?
Oh, dude, that's an easy one. I'd be an astronaut.
Astronaut?
When I was growing up, I always wanted to be an astronaut, but I guess I'm too brown or something. I don't know.
You're too tall, bro. You gotta be
I'm too
short.
tall. You gotta be a certain height, yeah.
Hey, I'm in there.
You gotta fit in the cockpit somehow, right? So
Yeah.
All right. If you could disinvent one thing, what would it be?
disinvent one thing. Oh my goodness, man.
Vaccines.
Oh man, if I could disinvent one thing, I think I would probably like a material thing.
Yeah, a material item.
Material items. I think I would disinvent. Man, that's a tough one. God bless. Maybe TVs. Maybe TVs, because we spend so much of our time on TVs. It's just a black hole for time, you know.
That's what Keenan said too.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, he said
He said the TV.
All right, Kenan, I got you.
He said the TV.
If you could be one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Leonardo da Vinci.
Why him?
Okay, so Leonardo da Vinci in the 1400s created stuff that we invented today. So imagine what that man could have done with his mind, with the technology of today.
Yeah.
Just the mind. Think of the minds of the past, like the founding fathers that created this country, that created the system of government. Have you ever read their writings? Like, if you read the Federalist Papers or like looked at the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence and like looked at how these dudes wrote and how intelligent they were to figure some of that stuff out without any technology, what could they do today?
Yeah, that is crazy.
That is true.
Imagine if you had Nikola Tesla alive today. What could he do?
Talk to
That's
some
why.
birds, man. That's about it. All right. So if you had all the money in the world, what's the first thing you would buy?
A private jet.
Why? Why? Like why?
Private jet? Because I could go anywhere whenever I wanted to.
Yeah.
And travel time is one of the big things, that holds people back, because in order for you to get to LA, it's a 4-hour flight. But if we all four of us want to go to LA right now, we got to go buy a ticket from Southwest or Delta or whatever. We got to go to the airport, we got to do this, we got to do that, pass through security, all that other nonsense. It's going to take a full day.
And then the flight gets delayed.
And then
you
the
don't
flight
go.
gets delayed or canceled, right? But if I got a private jet, I can go anywhere whenever I want.
Southwest, fuck you.
If you had one piece of advice, for the younger generation, what would it be?
One piece of advice for the younger generation, what would it be? Man, I'm not going to say some cliche like stay in school, because
Fuck school.
you hear that too much. No, honestly, it is okay to be yourself, and it is okay to feel. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to go out there and talk about issues that you have in your head, because you're trying to put out this macho persona. You know what I'm saying? Or you're trying to be this strong person. All that stuff is worthless. Go out there and lean on people. Lean on each other, because we're social creatures. We crave social interaction. If we don't lean on one another, that's when you start getting mental illnesses and all this kind of stuff come out there. So
I think Meldon felt that one.
I felt that one right here, man. I've been getting harassed by my co-hosts the last week working on this office, man. Y'all don't want to know. All right. This one's a little less deep. Who's your favorite artist right now? Musically.
Oh, dude. If I'm going to sound uncultured when I say this, but I don't really listen to a lot of music.
Dennis stopped listening to music in 2004. I just wanted to be clear on that.
Nah, come on.
2004 is cut off.
No, I do have some admiration out there. So I admire skill, so I admire a lot of rock that takes really drums is hard. Not everybody can play drums. Not everybody has 4-limb independence. I can play one rhythm here, and then other rhythms with my feet.
You got your feet, yeah.
Yeah, so guitar is also piano, but if I had to pick out some hip hop guys, I like J. Cole. I'm a huge Eminem fan just because his music isn't for everyone, but his lyrics always cut.
Yeah.
Like I said, 2004.
His lyrics always cut, bro. I like J. Cole. I like Kendrick too. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
So,
Fuck Eminem.
fucking J. Cole will take it. All right. What do you think the most common reason people give up is?
Man, depends on what it is, really, but fear. Fear is a big one. Fear of failure, fear of making yourself look stupid, fear of judgment. Fear of yourself sometimes too, like being a lesser version of yourself. So having the determination, surrounding yourself with the right people and the right resources really matters, because for the most part, you are a product of your environment. So who you surround yourself with and what you surround yourself with will help you.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite quote ever.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Superpower, man. That's a good question.
You already said fly with a private jet. You got to pick something else now.
Yeah, I know. But honestly, dang, man, I would really love to go to outer space. So, if I could have some type of superpower that would just let me, fly and not die, in freezing, and everything.
Space, yeah.
And, Superman, because he can travel between, planets and stuff.
Yeah.
If I could do that and, go to the moon or,
That'd be amazing.
just, and not die, have nothing mess with me, because I would love to be. You think about it, the small number of people that can say, I've been to space.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been on the moon, and I took a picture of Earth, and every person that's ever been alive, I just took a picture of them because I was on the moon.
Only half of them.
Or yeah. Neil Armstrong can say that. We can't say that.
That's true.
That'd be awesome.
But did he really go to the moon?
There you go.
That's
another podcast, right?
That's another
that is.
episode. And what's one thing you can't live without? It's got to be a material item. It can't
Material
be
item that I cannot live
material
without.
item. Yeah.
Dude, my toothbrush.
Hey, that's a good thing, man.
You best
Brush your
believe
teeth.
Hygiene.
brushing my teeth. Hygiene, bro. The way that you present yourself
100%.
says everything about you. Because whether you like it or not, we live in a world in which people judge you immediately.
Yeah.
Most communication is nonverbal. So how you present yourself, what you look like, what you wear, it matters, bro. I'm not going to show up to a job interview in sweats. You know what I'm saying? So why should I present myself to my friends and my family looking like a hobo? No offense to hobos. You know what I'm saying? So hygiene matters, personal appearance matters, whether you like it or not. It's a fact. So yeah, hygiene. So hygiene products.
Keep that smile clean, people.
And we doing the this is the end. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a clock that we got because we're timeless,
Okay.
and just smash it on camera, and you're gonna write down one quote on it and sign it. What's the
Okay.
quote gonna be?
Man, I have to think one on the fly. Okay, let's see.
Your favorite quote. Just a
I don't
short
know
quote.
any ones that are off the top of my head that somebody else has said, so I'll just come up with one real quick. Some related to time. So like, time is our most precious resource. Don't waste it. Live life to the fullest.
There we go.
There you go.
That's what
That's the one.
we gotta smash the clock.
Let's move
And just
on
because
to-
it's so messy, he'll
What about
sign
that
it and
good
all
lap-
that.
The good
after.
laptop.
Yeah. Just don't give it a hard smash because
Just
it's
crack it
going
open.
over. Just
Crack it open.
Yeah.
Crack
Is it polycarbonate or is it glass?
It's actual glass.
It's for real glass.
Yeah, man, it's glass.
It's a clock. A little bit harder. A little bit harder. A little bit
Get a
harder.
good one in.
A little bit
Hit
harder.
that mug. There you
There
go.
we go.
Time, baby.
I didn't want to ruin the